In the world of the fighting dog, it is a fact that the Pitbull is an unparalleled dog. This is part 2 of the audiobook, The Competition Dog. Chapter 2. The Old Man of the Mountain. Originally published in the American Game Dog Times October/Nov 1990 in February/March 1991. Part 1. It was December 1989, a few days before we got married, and we were now driving south on the Blue Ridge Parkway to visit with one of the most respected living legends of the dog game. Despite the unknown geography, we had little difficulties getting to our destination. The road we took ran parallel to a mountain valley, and across that valley we soon located what we were looking for, one large wooden sign nailed to an old apple tree that read, "Old Mountain Man's Kennel. American Competition Pit Bulldogs." This was the home of Lester Hughes, a man who, in the words of Tom Garner, is a living encyclopedia on the subject of American Pit Bull Terrier. We drove across the narrow wooden bridge that connected the road to the lane, which ended abruptly at the base of a hill leading to the mountain that has been the home of Mr. Hughes during his 68 years. When we got out of our car, we realized that it was much colder here than usual than in the hills where we lived. To the left was the house, and Mrs. Hughes us greeted at the door. He had the calm confidence of a man who has had all his goals complete in life, yet the intensity of competition was still there. He introduced him to his wife, Evelyn, and their 2 children, Christine and Cole. Then he continued to wear a coat and his trademark Western hat. We followed them to see their backyard of approximately 25 dogs. We were to a small ramp to the right of the lane, at the end of which was a building. Soon to our right, along the valley floor, was a row of kennel stalls where the bitches in production and the puppies of Mr. Hughes are retained. Everything was perfectly organized, 6-foot chains on each side with the doors seated 2 feet off the floor, an insulated doghouse attached to each kennel on the outside, with a small door on the side of each house to allow access. Instant for a bitch with puppies or a sick dog. Each point has a automatic faucet and a built-in food trough. The best feature of these kennels is that each one is elevated on a wooden platform. Mr. Hughes simply sprays them down with a high-pressure hose and the whole thing rinses off between the boards. At that time, the dogs in those kennels included Holly, a daughter of Ch. Jeep, ROM. Originated from Jean's Honey, Black Mert, a daughter of Groves Gr.Ch. Outlaw, and Baby. Jane, a very fine daughter of Crenshaw Screamer, plus a few pups sired by Eli III. Of the creation Midnight Cowboy. Just beyond the kennel was the building we'd seen from the runway. We stay surprised to find, when we entered, that he was warm inside. Building has heating, electricity, and running water. With a bathroom and a room. Main carpet. This has been the site of much of the Bulldog's history for years. The back door opened onto a deck above the creek, and a series of bridges. Narrow lanes and walkways that crossed over the creek from one side to the other. Behind the building, the creek, which, despite the bitter cold, was not frozen over and full of air, with the splash of water below, divides into 2 arms and then regroups, forming a small island of rock. On this island, and on both banks of the creek, There were a large number of barking bulldogs, running back and forth along the cables and trying to get our attention. Each dog's resources consisted of a winterproof dog house or a barrel partially buried in the bank of the creek, and a long and strong cable of run. The dogs alone drank the fresh water from the creek and looked completely at ease. House passing from one side of the water to the other through the stone. Mr. Dog's Hughes were in the prime of health, and among them was Long's Wordo, a son of Ch. Jeep that had proven to be a great breeder, Daisy, Ch. Jeep Rom. XGR.ch. Miss Rage, Bandit, GR.ch, Outlaw XRC Smalley, and Lil Bill Jr., Ch. Lil Bill X Sheena, plus a list of very well-bred young dogs, most notably Eli. Originated from Rascal, Buster, and Cowboy bloodlines. That was the first of many times we visited the Old Man Mountain. We feel honored to meet a man who is truly one of the competition dog dinosaurs, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to learn from him. Mr. and Mrs. Hughes have been quite generous with their hospitality, welcoming us into his home and offering his friendship. Mr. Hughes became involved with the Bulldogs 45 years ago, although until approximately 20 years ago he was not so recognized in the game of dogs. By the 1970s he had become known as the Old Man of Mountain. He has seen many great dogs in action for nearly half a century in the business, and was responsible for the careers of most of them. He is not a man who brags about his many accomplishments or has a negative to say about another creator, and his word is like a contract. He doesn't get involved in any small matter or gossip, so common in the dog business, and it's a remnant of an era when all that was required to seal an agreement of business was a handshake and the word. A few years ago, some boys came from the Bronx, New York, to buy a full-grown dog. Mr. Hughes told us once, they didn't have enough money with them to buy the dog they wanted, so I let them go ahead and take the dog home, and send me the money later. Mr. Hughes shook his head and smiled. Everyone told me I would never see the money again, but the money came through correspondence from New York, just as they had promised. He has a keen eye for dogs, and a great inner tranquility in his behavior. We've heard it said that Lester can see in 5 or 10 minutes that most people take an hour to see in a dog, and we have to value his opinion of a dog more than our own. We've already seen him look at the who seemed to be an ace in action, and when we asked him for his opinion, he simply declares that another 10 minutes and he would have given up, or, later, watching a dog youngster embarrasses its owner, tells the owner to wait another month and try again. Many dogs that almost became losers at 18 months became line dogs fast with just a little more time to mature, thanks to their wisdom. The philosophy of Mr. Hughes is that they'll all quit, only some will quit much faster than others. He has also taught us a lot about why different dogs give up. He saw the old dog Ch. Rascal lose a match and win several others, and said of the defeat, he lost because of the heat. Scared of the other dog, in fact when they cooled off, he was crazy to find your opponent. It makes sense that a dog that fails because its senses are starting to fail, because of heat, severe damage, exhaustion or shock, does not should be placed in the same category as a dog that hesitates because it doesn't want suffer what his opponent will do to him. We asked him what he thought of today's dogs compared to the caliber of dogs when he first started in the business. He told us that the overall quality of dogs from today's rapid lines are considerably higher than 30 or 40 years ago, and that there are many more high-capacity game dogs with heavy jaws out there. He also told us that the way games are viewed has changed, particularly regarding cold dogs. Cold, not a term that was in vocabulary or minds of the average breeders 40 years ago. A dog was game or not. Mr. Hughes thinks that the careers of many breeders with great potential were interrupted by this way of thinking. Part 2. In the latest issue of the Times, we gave a brief introduction to one of the living legends of the dog game, the Old Man of the Mountain. We now present Part 2 of O Velho Mountain Man, an interview we conducted with Lester Hughes in November 1990, in which Mr. Hughes talks, among other things, about some of his early contests, and some of the modern greats he has seen in action. I started putting dogs to fight when I was a teenager, Mr. Hughes. It started, we were sitting at the kitchen table with him and his wife and we had asked him how he got started with the bulldogs. Until then everyone had some kind of dog, and there was always a dog fight happening somewhere near here. I had a big collie at the time, maybe a thoroughbred, but on second thought, I think there was something bulldog about him because he had a big head with thick lips and must have weighed 75 pounds. His name was Jack. We used to take him everywhere in the county and he beat every dog in the area. One day my uncle and I were sitting with Jack on the side of the road here. Mrs. Hughes gestures through the window to the road on the other side of the creek. It was more of a trail than a road back then, just a dirt path, which you could follow on horseback or perhaps in a small wagon. Anyway, after a while a man came down the road with a dog. Short hair. He was from Tennessee, and we had heard that his dog was a fighter. True. He walked down the road to the old shop down the hill, I think, and a moment later we saw him climbing back up the hill. He looked at us sitting there with our dog watching him, and said, "Boy, hold your dog, this one I have here is bad." In truth, me and my uncle looked at each other, as if snubbing, and my uncle replied, "I think this one here you can take care of yourself." "Hold your dog," he repeated, "this one will hurt him if they get into a fight." I think that I must have put my hand on Jack's neck, as if I were going to hold him, and the man walked past us. I waited until he had passed 20 feet or so. Least, I let go of Jack's neck, and said, "Get him, Jack." And he took it, but this was the worst mistake of Jack's life. Mr. Hughes shook his head and a rare smile appeared on his face. "You don't could see the smaller dog in the middle of the cloud of dust," he continued, "but when the air it cleared what we saw was Jack on his back. The other dog had a good style of footprint and Jack was starting to sing. A moment later and Jack was doing nothing in addition to singing. After the man separated his dog from poor Jack, I asked him what kind of dog it was. He told me that that was a pit bulldog, and that was the first pit bulldog I ever saw. This was 6 months before I got my first bulldog. I don't know if the first ones I had were pretty good, but they won some background fights from yard. If one lost, we just put it back on the chain and said, well, he'll do better next time, because bulldogs were really rare around here at the time. I got my first real bulldogs from a Tunisian man who the old that I met that day with Jack pointed me out. We had some terrible fights. And the only physical conditioning the dogs had was hunting with us in the bush. Us. We had never heard of an exercise mat back then. Mr. Hughes told us that when he started getting into more serious fights, many combats were fought in the old country rules, or in the country style. In his own words, we used to let them fight until somebody's dog give up, or a guy comes in and takes his dog away, which were the rules we used. Long time. One of the first dogs he put to fight was his old dog Ranger, son of Cotton's Bullet. I was challenged by some muggles near Smithfield. When I introduced my dog, nobody knew me, and, man, they really had money. They wore rings that seemed to be worth my entire house, and gold cufflinks. I didn't know if I would fight the dog or not. In other words, they didn't want to accept the fight I wanted to bet on. Then one of the guys approached me. Your name? It was Whitey or something. He asked something about my dog, and then he said, "Gentlemen, any of you that want to gamble, come over here and let me see your names and who you are." Some of them just looked down their noses at that man, as if to say, "You think you have that much money?" Then he stretched out his arm to the front pocket and brought out a handful of bills about this size. He gestures with my hands a wad the size of an orange. It seemed like they were all notes of $100. Then he said, "If that's not enough, I have more in the other pocket, and if that still isn't enough, I have some more in the trunk of my car." Ranger easily won the fight in 58 minutes, and Whitey put everyone in queue, paying him when finished. The fight had been organized by a man named Hicks, Jack Kelly. Remember him, and a moment later Huey brought me a dog that he wanted to challenge the same people. I believe the night he brought you here. That dog weighed 91 pounds. We entered him in the fight with 78 pounds, interior style. What I didn't learn until after the dispute was over was that this dog had been beaten 6 months earlier, by the very same dog we had him with. We were putting now. That dog's name was Duke. He was a big black dog, son of big boy Huey Hicks, and the only way he'd fought was country style. Evelyn prepared him for that fight. At this point, Madam Hughes spoke. He was so big, he could drag me. But he had been trained in obedience and was just waiting while you put the collar on it. Then he would hop on the slatted mat and work out like crazy. He was as big as a calf. He was so well trained that a woman or a child could handle him, Mrs. Hughes continued, except when it was time to take him to the ring. It took William Cable, Bruce King, and I would bring him. His wife laughed. All three had to carry it, one in the middle, one at the back, and one at the front, and the one with the front had to hold his head very tightly. If the head his was let loose, he would bite someone. He was making a sort of growl, way down in his throat, that was terrifying to hear. Mr. Hughes continues, LP. Groomed and treated the other dog, and boy, there was no way I was going to win. They were quite confident, their dog already had beaten mine once, and had all sorts of antics in the fight. We released them and Duke went up and grabbed that dog. I don't think there was one other dog's hair touching the ground for about a minute or so. Madam, adds Hughes, that dog was there for over 3 hours, you know. How long is this? It was so long that they wanted to let Lester go and change the competitors, but the only reason Duke stayed there was because Lester was talking to him and encouraging him. If I left, he would leave, too. At one point, LP said, "Why don't you leave your dog's path and let him go?" So I said, "Okay, I get out of the way," and walked to the side. That dog came over to where I was standing and looked at me, then looked back. New to the other dog, who was going down. Then he came back and grabbed the throat of that dog and started shaking him again. Then Duke was losing, and Lester went to his knees with his face towards Duke, talking to him. Madam, Hughes said, Duke recovered. Lester must have spoken for him to keep on his feet, and LP, turning to the audience, said, "I don't know. That Mr. Hughes is saying to this dog." Mr. Hughes and Duke won the match. After 3 hours and 25 minutes, the other side recognized that their dog was dead and gave up. Old Ranger, I don't know how many won country style, but he beat them all that we put in front of him. That son of a bitch might even attack me if I don't do what he wanted. I remember one time when I had him on a chain 20 feet behind the barn. I approached him and noticed when I arrived that he had a wild look in her eyes. I wasn't really sure if he intended to stay friendly or bite me, but when I got closer he came at me with his mouth open, and I realized he was coming straight for my face. In the last minute, I dodged. Evelyn had given me a new winter coat for Christmas, and Ranger took the coat collar and tore a large strip of about 5 inches across the back. Then he took the strip to the floor, shaking it as he was entitled. His wife clenches her fists and mimics as if she is hitting someone with a hook. When Ranger lunged at him the second time, Lester hit him like that, and that dog's eyes rolled back, its tongue came out of its mouth, and it fell shattered. I knocked him out, and I thought I killed him. When he came here, he was so friendly as a puppy. I believe that dog had flashbacks or something. Most of the time he liked me to death, but every now and then he looked as if he said, "What the hell are you?" Once I was coming with the bucket of food. At the time those 5-gallon buckets were metal, not plastic, and he took it again. I hit him on the head with the bucket so hard I thought I had him slain. Fainted him, again. Then he woke up and acted like nothing had happened. On another occasion, I was preparing you for what we call a merry-go round, happy ride. I had put a chicken in a cage for him to hunt. He took it hard, it was so fast that the chicken was in pieces. I hit him with the chicken, but he decided he was going to get it anyway. Face. We had a fight. Terrible that day. Madam. Hughes added, "You could never turn your back on the Ranger." Least I never did it. You never really knew what was going on in your head. She turned to her husband. Remember that night Ranger ran away and lunged at another dog down by the river? Mr. Hughes waved. It was pitch dark and the middle of winter. Ranger was about to drown the other dog. I jumped into the creek and nearly froze to death, tearing it apart. You. Up to this point, Mr. Hughes was smiling and joking as he reminisced about Duke and Creek, but now he was serious again. I used not to see much danger in one who was vicious. I knew a bulldog could hurt a man, but I didn't. I think I really understood how much. I wasn't afraid of him. Now I am much more cautious with dogs that bite people. They can really hurt you, even kill you. I honestly don't believe a grown man can win a 65-pound Pitbull without a weapon, if he decides to attack you. We asked Mr. Hughes about any of the famous dogs he saw fight, and how he could classify them, starting with Ch. Rascal. Man, he was a bulldog. He won 5 contract fights and several more. Released from the chain, but could not be recognized as a great champion because he lost his first fight. I was in that fight. It was like 35 degrees that day. And Rascal was hot and didn't want to fight. He didn't run away from the fight, in other words. He didn't tune. I've seen a lot of dogs do this, and a lot of people yelling, "He's a weak," but if a dog doesn't start a fight, this doesn't necessarily make him weak. There have been many dogs destroyed as weaklings that they were not. I've never seen a dog that could outrun Rascal, even one he lost died less than an hour and a half after the dispute. I put a dog with him once, a real tough dog, son of big boy, that I ain't never seen any dog win. Rascal passed it back, and kept passing it, for over an hour, until that he gave up. Rascal fought any style, but he liked to work with his head. He could overcome any style of a dog that was put to him. I think there are so many good ones. Dogs originating from Ch. Rascal as of any dog that has been bred in the last 25 years. Stompanato's dog could be compared to the Rascal, had the same father and their mothers were almost the same. I know that the two bloodlines seem to match very well. Susie was bred from Stompanato and produced some very good Rascal Jr. pups. Stompanato was a good-looking, well-built dog. I've never seen him curled up. In fact, I heard 2 different stories about the dog. One was that he had won 2 in Mexico, and the other was that he was cold. I don't know if he was cold or not, but many good bulldogs today have Stompanate blood. Buster was another one I heard 2 different stories about, that he won 1 fight, and that he got cold too. John Chavar traded him to Maurice Carver for a whiskey batch, I heard. He stayed with Buster 2 weeks or 2 months and then he died. Lapasse kept the dog and it died before having Buster, for the same period of time. I started breeding Buster puppies when he was very old, but he had no puppies. He produced some very good ones. His daughter Gr.Ch. Miss Rage killed all the dogs she fought except one, which she killed, too, the second time around that she faced. I've seen Midnight Cowboy in action. He was a little black dog, short and like that. He had bow-legged legs. He was a really good dog, one of the best, in my opinion. I would put him in the top 10 of all dogs I've ever seen fight. He bit good and hard, not as hard as some dogs I've seen, but hard enough to win. I saw Chivo kill a Billy Collins dog in less than 30 minutes, God, he was a bulldog. I'd say he's also among the best I've ever seen. Mr. Hughes also cited Gr.ch. Boomerang as one of the best. He said, but he thinks the fiercest, toughest dog he ever saw was Gr.ch. Zebo. Ch. Homer was a tough biter, but Zebo was the toughest. His fights never lasted a long time, which shows that he was fierce enough to kill his opponents. They say Greaser didn't die. I don't know if he died or not, but I never heard anyone talk about him afterwards, even though they say he was retired for selection. There really wasn't much competition in that fight, even if Greaser didn't had a 3-pound lead. I saw the old tramp's dog, Red Boy, in action. He beat me once. He was a good bulldog, solid. Some people say he couldn't bite, that he won because he had no match for his opponent. Huey Hicks brought a bitch big to me that he wanted to challenge with Red Boy, and I did, and for approximately 40 minutes it looked like she was going to kill Red Boy out there in the ring. Then he started biting on her head so hard, and he was biting really hard. He won in 1 hour and 17 minutes. That was the only time I challenged a female against a male, and it wasn't mine challenge. Until then this was rare, and I don't believe it. It's not fair to either of them. There are times when a male does not fight a female as he would another male. Most of the time the female would have an advantage because of this, and a female. He always fights a male as hard as he would fight another bitch. This is just my opinion, someone else might think differently. Mr. Hughes also saw the large Ch. Honey Bunch in action, and said to us, I think she was one of the best bitches I've ever seen. In the first dispute she beat on a dog I trained and conditioned, and killed him. I went to your next dispute against a dog named Bonnie. She killed that one there, too. We were somewhat surprised by her response when we asked him about Finley's Ch. Bo. He saw him fight and asked if he was a good game dog. No, he replied, he refused to fight in front of 75 to 100 people. When he lost his second fight to Vindicator, I couldn't tell who he was. Weak in rank, in fact Vindicator was probably the only dog that could really beat him. Bo got Vindicator's head in the first 15 minutes or so. He had a very good mouth and was biting hard. But then Vindicator started to attack its front legs very hard. He worked on one first, then on another, then back to the first, and so on, and Bo began to sing a song. Little LP bet Bob $100 that he couldn't fight, but he started and Bob chose him. He refused to go further with his choice of courtesy. When he stayed on the line, my exact words to Bob were, Bob, walk around to the other corner and see if he will follow you. He did, but Bo just turned and looked at the corner of the ring. Bo went on to win 5 or 6 more fights after he quit that one. I have not seen Gr.ch. Snake fight, but James Crenshaw told me he was hell of dog. Ch. Jeep was a good game dog, but I've seen better. I don't wish. Look down on him, he just wasn't the all-time great dog like some people say he was. He was really game. Any dog that fights 3 hours and 45 minutes is. I know some people who say he couldn't take the same abuse as he suffered in that dispute. He was ahead in that fight, won from the beginning, but he proved in the contest with the dog, Wiener, that he could come back to win. I didn't see that fight, but I heard that Weenie had him confused for a good part of it. Of that dispute. Weenie was a funny-looking dog. He was a tall dog and 2 dogs long. I've seen a lot of dogs developed like him, who could really bite hard and had a lot of strength for it. We asked Mr. Hughes what was the hardest biting dog he ever saw. From Gr. Ch. Zebo, and the bitch that bit the hardest. The fiercest dog I've seen in the last 10 years or so is Ch. Homer. As far as I know, no dog has been able to spend half an hour with Homer and survive. He also killed several dogs in fights before I found him. The best, and fiercest, bitch I've ever seen is Gr. Ch. Spooky, daughter of Homer and Susie. I raised Spooky and taught her before I sold it to Ricky Jones. During that time I got rid of several dogs that I don't think I gave a fair rating. I had pitted them against Spooky and they looked bad, but Spooky was so good that it made any dog she fought look bad. The only dog I ever saw do well against her was the bitch that Bobby Hull put with her, Jeanette. She fought Spooky for over an hour. Spooky took a terrible bite on the head, but it was on the other bitch's chest the whole time. She managed to stop Jeanette. She refused to fight at 1 hour and 42 minutes. I've heard people say that she couldn't fight anymore, but she could. Continue. This was the second chapter of the audiobook, The Competition Dog. Sign up so you don't miss the third chapter. God bless you all. I went.